Hi, welcome back. This is Needed Conversations. My name is Victoria. This is my husband, Ryan Cole. If you're watching via YouTube, please be sure to subscribe and click the notification. And if you are listening to our podcast, you know that we have been in our Summer Love series, and we're continuing this conversation, more importantly, about understanding gender roles and really jumping into how to date in this episode.
Yeah, every generation deals with different kind of dating dynamics, and especially over the last 100 years or so, it's really changed, right? The reasons for dating and how you dated were pretty clear cut 2 or 3 generations ago, but now with the emergence of technology and just a way of life that is different, it's vastly different, right? Our traditional gender roles have been upended, and that's not a bad thing, right? Because some of those gender roles were societally generated, and they were generated for various reasons. You can go back to last week's episode and hear us talk about that. But now we're in a place where if we're not careful, we can lose sight of gender dynamics altogether and misunderstand who we are as male and female, which is what God designed us from the beginning. And although we are equal in weight and value and authority, we are unique. Males and females are different. And as we embrace new gender roles in our society today, we have to keep at the foundation. What are God's design for each gender to operate in? So traditional gender roles that are upended are ones like, women are supposed to stay home and take care of the kids and cook and clean, and men are supposed to go out into the world and bring home the bacon. That's not a biblically defined gender role per se, right? But it's one that some people still hold to, and it works for them, and for other people it doesn't. And so as we go into dating, you have to go in being able to ask the right questions so that you know whether or not you're compatible on a spiritual level, on an intellectual level, and romantically. And whether or not you understand what role that God wants you to play in terms of your gender and the biblical role, the spiritual aspects of your maleness or your femaleness, and then whether or not you want to continue on with some more traditional gender roles in your home, or whether or not the calling and the purpose inside of you is going to require a flexibility there. And if you don't answer those questions while you're dating, you could end up married with someone who has a traditional mindset and expects you to perform in a certain way in your gender role, whereas your purpose in calling you is requiring something different. And so you don't want to be disappointed when you get married. And so the reason we're talking about all of this is because we believe marriage is the foundation of every society. And getting it right is so important so that you don't have to unravel the mistakes once you're already married. Yeah. And we're doing our best as marriage coaches and mentors to be able to provide the right educational materials so that you date the way God intended you to date. And so this is kind of touching on some of the topics, but we're going to be doing deep dives and giving you really foolproof strategies on how to date in our webinar that we're doing on July 8th. It's called the Summer Love Webinar, and it's totally free. Come and spend a night with Victoria and I online as we talk about everything to do with dating God's way. And we're going to do Q&A, some giveaways. It's going to be so fun and exciting. Invite your friends to jump on with you, but you can register right now for this free webinar at summerlovewebinar.com.
Yeah, and you know what? I love the fact that we kind of piggyback off of the book that you have written called I Love You More, Most, and Forever. And you started in your book by talking about self and about, the importance of understanding your own self, because in order for you to ask questions with, your potential person that you're dating, that could be a potential spouse, in order for you to ask them the right questions, you must ask those questions yourself first. And that comes from, understanding your identity, and first and foremost, of course, having the relationship with God and having that walk with God so that he can reveal those things that you may be struggling with, on that personal level, and you can confront them so that you don't carry that into dating and your marriage. And so we really are passionate about giving you the tools that you need in order for you to have a successful marriage, because we don't want to just to date around as the world shows it, but we are taking marriage seriously. So when we're dating for marriage.
That's right. Your first interaction with marriage will begin with your relationship with Christ. That's because the Bible calls us the body of Christ, but also the bride of Christ. And the relationship that we have with Jesus is much like a husband and a wife have. The Bible even instructs husbands to love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. And so your first interaction with this institution is going to be in accepting Christ. And in accepting Christ, he begins to show you what your purpose is and help you to cultivate that. And knowing your purpose is vitally important going into dating so that you date and ask the right questions for the sake of compatibility.
Yeah.
We believe in a 3-phase approach to dating: the outer court, which deals with the spiritual aspects of a relationship. And really, this is the qualifying stage. It's so important, and it should be out in a public forum. The outer court of the Tabernacle of Moses was in plain sight. So everyone living around the tabernacle could peer in and see who was in there, right? And who was, performing the sacrifices, etc. What was going on. It was in plain sight. The fences were low enough to be able to see in. And so this phase of the relationship should be no pressure. Your standard is set, but you want to give people an opportunity, to come into your life so you can see, what their depth is and whether or not there is any level of compatibility. So the outer court it's a pretty low threshold. Most of the time it's getting to know people in group settings, and it's beginning to ask those qualifying questions to see if there is spiritual depth there. Do they have a relationship with Jesus? Are they just going to church because somebody dragged them there, or because you want them to be there? Or are they actually excited about serving not only in the house of God, but their community? Do they pray? Do they know the word of God? Do they have a devotional life of any kind? And what are their core values? Because those things in the Bible and that relationship with the Holy Spirit that enables that word to come alive inside of you really shapes your core values. What do you value? Do you value telling the truth? Do you value kindness and generosity? And really understanding a person's core values will tell you a lot about where they're going in life and whether or not that's the path you want to ride in as well. Because your life in marriage should run parallel with your spouse.
Yeah. To kind of put it like in more like, I guess, relevant terms, like in the way we kind of function day to day in regards to dating, what Ryan was talking about, the outer court, I think we kind of stumbled in as far as our dating went. We were friends for a year, and the way we kind of got to know each other is we were hanging around in a group setting, and we would do worship nights, we would have tea nights, we would have game nights, and those times we were able to just see how that person corresponded with other people. Not that you were just sitting there and actually just staring that person down for them to like make a mistake or, do those things. But people are more authentic whenever they're actually in a crowd of people than they are being one-on-one, because there's always this pressure of making sure that you're, conversational, that you're not boring. What does this person think of me? You want to dress well, you want to smell good. You always put your representative. But whenever you are in the outer court, this is why it's so important. We always talk about getting yourself plugged in. Don't be around at home and, talk to God about how, you're not finding anybody around you because you're not willing to step out of your comfort zone, of your people, of your family. I was part of a Slavic culture, which I have nothing against that, but my brother, me and my sister kind of stepped out and we started going to a larger church because we just felt like we needed to be spiritually fed more. So that was huge for us because we stepped out of the culture that we've known, even the way we worshiped at church, because whatever, we have seen at this other church, it was more charismatic. People were more expressive. I mean, we were like standing there like, what is going on? Like that to us was so foreign. But over time, I understood why these people were so expressive because, even David danced before the Lord. So God really showed me different things. And not that I went to that church specifically because I wanted to get married, but really just putting yourself out there, you will experience new experiences and you will meet new people. So just to put it in relevant terms, outer court does not mean that you have to wait for somebody to take you out on a date.
Right. I think it's just stepping out of your comfort zone and the realm of the familiar.
Yeah.
For me, even though I had gone to the church where we both went for years, I was going to a mega church, but my circle was still small.
Yeah.
And I decided to distance myself from familiar relationships and do some things that was out of the box. And I drug my cousin along, and Victoria and I actually met at an event that was outside of the church.
Yeah, somebody hosted that.
And
Yep.
we really had no interaction at church before then, maybe passing along, but never really got to know each other at all. Didn't realize we even went to the same church. But when we met at this outside event, it was because I said to myself, I'm going to be open in this season to new experiences. And her brother invited me over to their house for tea, and that was a life-changing experience for me because it was there where we started to form this young adults group that sat around and talked about the things of God, and really in an open forum discussed what we believed about dating, marriage, life, purpose, calling, all of those things about the Bible. And we would break out the guitar and worship and sing. And those kind of environments are rare today.
Mm-hmm.
And I encourage you, if you don't have a place where that is, happening, a church that, embraces community in that way, you should start it. You should start the crew gathering, whether it's one or two people, and, take a leap of faith and see what God does in meeting new people. And that could even mean, starting a new hobby, right? Moving gyms. You've been going to the same gym for 10 years. Go to the one across town. Go and take a class, a pottery class, or step out of your comfort zone and meet new people. And you have to ask yourself, this is important, some of these questions before you even start opening your heart to dating, because knowing yourself first is going to prepare you to ask the questions when you start dating. So you can ask, and this is from my book, which you can get from my website, ryancoleempowerment.com. You ask yourself, are you satisfied with your relationship with God? If you were to look at the tabernacle of Moses, at what stage of the tabernacle would you place yourself in relationship with him? Like, is your relationship really surface level with God? Or have you gone deeper? What are some ways you can cultivate intimacy with God? What was your example of marriage growing up? And how has that affected the way that you view marriage? Do you have a warped view of marriage because you come from a broken home? How might your relationship with God affect your marriage? What role does the husband and wife play in cultivating spiritual growth in the home? All of this deals with your beliefs about what you think marriage is, what your expectations are, maybe correcting some things that you've gotten wrong, or you've had a bad example and so you don't really know where to start. But really asking some of these questions is going to be key, because marriage is eternal.
Yeah.
When you step into that commitment, you don't want to be having to go through these stumbling blocks along the way because you failed to ask the questions to begin with.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that, because whenever you actually ask those questions yourself, sometimes God will deal with issues of your own heart. Maybe you had past trauma of seeing certain things in your parents' relationship that was just very traumatic for you. And so if you don't deal with those things right now, then whenever you do get in a relationship, you will tend to project that onto the other person, and it's not that person's fault. So sometimes asking these questions is really for you. It's not like, oh, I'm going to be, I'm going to have ammunition. So when I go on the date, I'm going to ask all these serious questions. But in reality, you never sat down by yourself in your own space and actually thought about those things yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we want to like put this front for people that we're so smart and we're so out there, and so whenever we're dating, we're like, oh, we got this, but it's like, once you start working on yourself, you start seeing like, wow, I got so many problems. I don't even know if I'm ready for dating, because God has really got to do a mighty work in me in order for me to prepare
Just
me for that.
shifting of your mindset, really.
Yeah.
Where we have had false beliefs about what marriage is supposed to be. And we feel pressured in it from society, that it's the next phase of life, that if you're in your mid 20s or early 30s, you should be married by now. And especially if you come from like a subculture in the United States, like my wife came from the Slavic community, their expectations was even more so like, if you are 25 years old, you're an old bride.
Yeah.
But that may not be your destiny. I think that there's no set time when you should be married, except for when you are ready for that commitment.
Yeah, you know what? Age does not equal maturity. And so different people mature at different rates. There's some people that I would approve of getting married at 18, 19, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Although that's still pretty young. But then there's some people that are in their 30s, 35s, and they're just struggling. Like the way when you have conversations with them, you could just tell that the world kind of revolves around them, and it just makes you feel really nervous. So like you asking those questions yourself will really help to even eliminate when people do come up to you in the group setting and have these conversations with you. You're like, wow, no, that's a non-negotiable for me. So like, why even waste time trying to go on a date with somebody or setting these expectations or hopes up whenever you can have a conversation with a person? Not to say that you shouldn't give people grace, but you already know, like, this is what I want. And this is, what I feel like my purpose is and mission is and assignment is. So I'm going to be very strategic about it. And again, taking it seriously, not just dating just to be dating around, but dating for marriage.
And don't feel like that if you aren't going out on dates and dating a lot, that somehow you are missing an opportunity. Well, I would rather you date very little and find the right person than to go through a bunch of horrible dating experiences and relationships before you get to the right one, And so that's why the outer court is a no pressure zone.
Yeah.
It's an environment where, and I think churches should be at the forefront of helping to create these opportunities. I know we're trying to do that at our church. The Living Room Congregation, and just giving people the opportunity to talk about their views on dating and the misunderstandings. Like, we had a group of young adults that we hung out with a couple weeks ago, and just hearing the men talk and the women talk about, their experience with the opposite sex and, their frustrations with the opposite sex, and hearing that from someone gives you an idea of maybe how you've approached things wrong and what an expectation is that men or women have. And so doing the outer court thing, it's no pressure, but you're asking these spiritual questions, not in an interrogating type of setting, but you're asking them in a general setting, and then listen for what's being said and what's not being said. You've got to become a good listener. Don't get caught up in infatuation, right? Because the person that you might be physically attracted to the most could be an empty shell of a person. Could be very arrogant, superficial, or maybe you're just incompatible in general. And just because you're attracted physically doesn't mean that it's going to be a successful marriage. And on the other end, especially with women, I know this to be true, like attraction comes from something deeper than just that sexual pheromones that you're sensing, and the chemistry of the physicality of it all. But you getting to know someone, I can honestly say Victoria might not have picked me out of the crowd and said, okay, that's my type. That's the one I'm attracted to. And to be honest, like, we went a whole year as friends and it wasn't a big deal. And I don't take that offensively, because I know I feel good about myself. I feel that I'm an attractive person. But when we started dating and really digging into the deep conversations, the attraction emerged in a more profound way than just physical. And she is physically, well, I want to let you speak for yourself.
Of course, I'm married to you, honey. But I was a different kind of person. Like, I'm a yes and no person, and I was never like flirty. So everybody experiences, I think, dating and, a courtship in a different way, or the way their feelings go towards each other. Some people have an attraction right away, and they have to work on, making sure that they don't, you know,
Overstep the bounds.
overstep the bounds.
Because it can put blinders on,
Yeah.
and then you are unable to see what you need to see. You know?
And so, like, I feel like to us, we learned each other in a friendship circle, and that was really helpful for me because I am not a very trusting person. It takes me time to build trust with a person, but when I do like build trust, I'm a very loyal person. It definitely takes me time. So I think that time was definitely needed because I had a preconceived idea of what, I'm going to marry, who I'm going to marry. And that was within my culture, but
commitment was very important to you.
Yeah.
Like, that was one of your values. And I could sense that too when I asked you to marry me that night when we got engaged. I could tell that there was a different level of openness that you had toward me. And that chemistry physically only built from there.
Yeah.
Because we had such a mutual respect for one another, we had started talking about our callings and what we wanted to do with our lives and what our dreams were. And getting engaged was just, it wasn't just symbolic, but it was spiritual in nature as well. It was almost like, in a sense, getting engaged was just as important as us on our wedding day saying I do.
Yeah.
Because at that point we were fully committed. Whether or not we had signed a marriage contract or not yet, we were betrothed. And that was important. And it was all of that time that we spent not dating and not being physical that enabled us to have such a quick and pain-free dating experience, right? Because we dated in February, engaged in April. That's like 2 months later. And then
married in October.
Married 6 months later. And so,
and people ask us like what was our like first year of marriage, and I feel like it was really good because we talked about so many things. We covered so many subjects, and we made sure that we were open with one another as the relationship progressed, of course, about what we're going to do and what we want to do, what we want to accomplish, what we feel like is our purpose and our mission. And, as the relationship progressed and we got engaged, of course, making sure that we're open and not having anything hiding. Once we got married, there was nothing that we had to unravel. So,
and that's too why I believe in a short engagement, because if you've done it this way, and you've dug into all of those spiritual components, which is the outer court, intellectual components, lifestyle components, vision components, which is the inner court, you're already at the veil, right? So the physical opens up, and it's very hard to keep those boundaries until you get married. And that was a challenge for us too, because the attraction became more intense, I would say, than any other relationship that I had ever had. I had dated before, but there was no attraction, no chemistry like I had when Victoria and I were dating and were engaged, because there was just such this trust. And I remember even on our honeymoon, our wedding night, there was no awkwardness whatsoever. There was no shyness. There was no what's the word I'm looking for? Like there was just no uncomfortable part of the honeymoon.
Yeah, but that's not everybody's. That may not be everybody's story, but that was our story.
Well, I think the reason it was though, honey, was because it we had already unveiled all of the intimate parts. Intimacy isn't just seeing a person naked and having sex or whatever that is, you know.
Yeah.
It's getting to know the intimate details of a person's life and heart and passions, and we had been there and we had connected on those intellectual and spiritual levels that the physical just came easy.
Yeah, and what the other thing that's really, helped us too is the fact that we both saved ourselves from marriage. So there was never anything that we had to carry from previous relationships or
Right.
being intimate with anybody, that it was fresh. It was something that we started new by ourselves.
And I do
that was
recognize
beautiful.
that every person is different because
Yeah.
they have different experiences and traumas and things and past negative relationships and mistakes and things that they have to, unpack, which really makes the first 2 years of marriage for most people very hard. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that the first 2 years of our marriage was very hard. I think our first year of marriage was extremely easy and it was blissful.
Mm-hmm.
Our second year of marriage was harder because I think that there was some stuff coming up in us, and we were feeling the challenges as we were finding a balance in our gender roles.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we were trying to figure that out. And then around that second or third year is when we had gotten you got pregnant and we were expecting, and then we had a miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to walk through that, and that was tough. But I would say those first years of marriage, that is a struggle for most people right off the bat, was not as a struggle for us because we did it right.
Yeah.
And that's not an arrogant thing for us to say, but that's just wisdom that we gained in the process and submitting ourselves to God. And that's the kind of wisdom we want to give to you guys, especially on our Summer Love webinar. So make sure you register for it. It's free, and it's for those who are single, dating, or engaged. This is just like premarital, getting you ready for dating. If you're already engaged, it'll really help you prepare for marriage. And hey, make sure that there's no questions going into marriage. And if you have any hesitancy, we can address that. And maybe that's not the person for you. Just because you have a ring on, maybe they're not the one for you. And it's okay. And it's better for you to address that now. I would rather you plan a whole wedding and, spend even the money and walk away from it than to go ahead with it just because you paid the money and have a ring on your
Everybody's there,
finger and
yeah.
you have these expectations. This is the most important decision that you will make. So why not get educated on it? Why not get the tools? summerlovewebinar.com. Register now. And hey, if you're already married and you need help unraveling all of this inside of your marriage, there's something coming for you at the end of summer. We're going to be shifting the conversation in a couple of weeks to discussing married life, unraveling all of the details of marriage, and we're going to talk about sex. That's going to be an exciting conversation. And then we're going to be having some exciting needed conversation. But stay tuned if you're married. And if you haven't gotten my book, I Love You More, Most and Forever, do so now at RyanColeEmpowerment.com. You can get a signed copy there. And this is for those who are married or those who are dating. Mm-hmm. So if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and join us back here next week as we're going to be talking about the inner court. Now, the inner court is what, Victoria?
The soul.
The soul. That's right. You're dealing with habits, lifestyle. You're dealing with vision, communication. So all of those are important. And that's really the first stage of an intimate dating experience, where you move from the group setting into one-on-ones and start unpacking it. I love it because in our inner court experience, it started at Barnes & Noble.
Around many books.
Which is a place where you fill your head with knowledge, and all I wanted to do is learn more about Victoria. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But we do, we do, when you get married, you step into a journey of learning and more about that person every single year. And even now, at going on 8 years of marriage, there's still a lot for us to learn too.
Yeah, it's always a process.
Well, this has been Needed Conversations. We want to thank you for joining us. We're actually recording this on Sunday night, and we've had a long day. So you probably hear it in our voices or see us, bobbing a little bit. And that's because it's late. It's really bedtime. We got a full week ahead of us. But we want to thank you for joining us and interacting with us. Hey, you may be listening to this as you're getting ready to go to sleep too. So this has been a good conversation. Join us next week as we continue the Summer Love series. God bless.